Welcome back to Sex Crimes Defense Podcast with Chance and Jay. Chance Oberstein is a criminal defense attorney in California. I'm a media professional. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as legal advice. Chance, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about Alicia Hughes. You familiar with that case?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so let me just give you the short form of what it's about. Hughes is a 31-year-old school secretary in Union City, Indiana, who was arrested in 2026. She was charged with 5 counts of child seduction for allegedly having sex with a 17-year-old student and also being involved with an 18-year-old student. The investigation began after her husband reportedly caught her with the 18-year-old, and police were called in for a domestic incident. Ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay. So you probably know a little bit about this domestic incident, but that's how the whole thing got started. What was your take on what happened there?
Well, it is weird that it starts with a domestic incident, which I find ironic because, and by the way, if I sound irritated, it's because I find this case irritating.
Okay. Fair enough.
I do. And I'm gonna hopefully explain why.
And just for our viewers or listeners to understand, we don't prejudge these things. We don't take sides. We're analyzing them, and where we're analyzing them from is from a legal perspective and a social media perspective. So, if we get a little crazy about what we do, it's just a natural response of where we're coming from. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, thank you. And that's the thing is that I think, and I gotta believe there are other people that think the media coverage on this is ridiculous. The way that she's so evil and torturous and a seduction artist. It is ridiculous. And in fact, not a reflection of the law.
Right? Probably not. But
it's not.
What is social media anyway?
People acting really silly about sex crimes. That's what current social media is to me.
Interesting enough, in social media, there's a real push to prosecute this case and get her convicted, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And I think social media hasn't thought this through. I feel like it's kind of like when we look back and we wonder how people were so silly. I think that's where we are now. Somebody's going to look back on this and be like, God, people were so judgmental on this stuff for having so little information. It's unbelievable to me.
Well, in fact, that's probably why the case is going to get thrown out. I mean, the main legal issue is the public release of her police interrogation video. Apparently, this all started as a domestic violence investigation because her husband was beating her for having the relationship with the 18-year-old. But when they interviewed her and she spoke about the 18-year-old, it started a private investigation about her since she's a secretary at a school. So in that interrogation, they asked her about the 18-year-old, and apparently she was transparent about that. But there was also mention of a 17-year-old where she did the right thing, which is she asserted her right to remain silent, which she should have probably done from the start. Because whatever she said and wherever she stopped probably ticked off the interrogator. Whatever it was, it set this whole case on the tracks going south, because that's where it's headed right now. There is a great potential for dismissal because a video showing her crying during a police interview was released to the media. Now, the prosecutor said their office did not authorize that release, but apparently law enforcement did release it. And because jurors may have already seen the video and formed opinions, it could prejudice her right to a fair trial. I mean, that's just obvious. So what do you think about that?
Well, while we're here, I'll ask the question. So who released the video?
The law enforcement officials, the interrogators. Law enforcement agency that was doing that.
All right, do they have the legal authority? And I know that it's not often that citizens get to question what law enforcement does. So I'm going to do that now. Can law enforcement do that?
Yeah, they can. Okay, but they can get penalized for it too.
Why
And
is it okay for?
I'll explain that. I mean,
Yeah.
they shouldn't do that. And this is what happens. You have, well, let's go through this for a minute and really talk about why
Because
these
I've been,
why
I
these pretrial publicity things taint the jury pool. Whether a prosecutor gets up and says something, that's inappropriate, or they release things like this. But let's talk about this in particular, and we're talking about tainting the jury pool. Under the Sixth Amendment, a defendant has the right to a fair and impartial jury trial. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, according to the laws as I know them currently, yeah.
Yeah, the Constitution guarantees it.
Thank you.
If a confession or interrogation video circulates widely before trial, potential jurors may watch the suspect appearing to admit guilt or behaving emotionally. Well, she broke
this
down
is
crying.
national.
She broke down crying, right?
Yeah.
So there was a response, and that's what they released. They didn't release her saying anything. They released the fact that she broke down crying. And that's behaving emotionally, which could be read as, to potential jurors, an admission, a nonverbal admission of guilt. So jurors may form opinions before hearing the evidence in court, and defense lawyers like myself can argue that the jury pool is irreparably prejudiced. And so what a court does in order to cure this is they usually try less dramatic remedies first. They think about changing the venue, or maybe delaying the trial, or intensive jury screening. But as in this case, if the publicity is extreme, a judge could determine a fair trial is impossible. And now you tell me, how extreme is it in this case?
Well, I number one, I don't know how she'll get a fair trial, and we're going to go into more of why I believe that is. But when I watch the coverage of this case and I see the comments, people are on this high horse of judgment, okay? And if you're going to remain on your high horse of judgment, and that's a ridiculous thing to say, so I'm going to keep saying it, because that's the way modern society handles these types of situations, is on a high horse of judgment. Where was the high horse of judgment in law enforcement before releasing this video?
Well,
I mean, please.
I think this is part of the problem, because we're all humans. It's a human response. Social media is a reflection of our humanity here in our culture. I think, given the circumstances, this was a case about infidelity. She was having a relationship with an 18-year-old while she was married. Then that turned into an allegation of domestic violence, which morphed into this sex case. And so on very many levels, this just lights up the board, and social media then blows up. And that's where we're at right now.
Okay, but there's no focus on the husband beating her. Like, okay, you can go, sir, because we're focused on this. And I still object to mugshot entertainment. That, I think, is the backdrop of
Explain that mugshot entertainment thing.
Mugshot entertainment. We see it all the time. People love watching. You see mugshots. Anytime a celebrity is given the perp walk and the mugshot, they put it in the newspaper and everybody ogles and comments, and it's politicians. Mugshot entertainment is everywhere. To me, mugshot entertainment is part of why we love the Epstein case. We love it and we hate it. So we go over to this. She's still a private citizen. She's not a public official. She's not a limited purpose public figure. So she's a private individual, and she hasn't. Where's the court, or rather, where is due process? She has not even. Has she been formally charged? How is there a video released already? That's mugshot entertainment. That's wrong.
Well, whatever it was, it sounds like she must have, whoever interviewed her must have been pretty disturbed about it.
Fine, be
Because,
disturbed
you know,
and retain her privacy rights.
I
That's
think
the high horse of judgment. You're a legal institution, and
well,
you're going to release.
I think he was judging her in terms of, you know,
Yes, he
having it
was.
her own way, which is she'll talk about the 18-year-old because, you know, that territory, you know, is part and parcel with what happened with the battery and is not illegal.
Okay,
But
well,
when it comes to when it comes to the 17-year-old in school, that's a different matter.
Okay, well, he made the wrong judgment call, and now he needs to be investigated for releasing her private video.
Well, and the other thing is maybe in retrospect, she might have done better just to remain silent completely because this is beyond the initial battery interview. So obviously the onus was on her to assert her rights immediately. Probably that would have been the best thing to do.
Well, so I want to say this, is that I was thinking about this too. You know why people talk to the police. And you know, we don't know what was said to her. We're your friend. We're trying to help you. We're your buddy. We know that your husband beats you. We know that, you know, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Whatever was said. But that people talk to the police because they're trying to cut off the bleeding into their whole life, right? If they can put a tourniquet on this problem and stop, you know, a seismic disruption of life, that's what they're trying to do. And I think police know that. Now, this is not a full tangent against law enforcement, but I think releasing that video calls for an investigation. It's an invasion of her privacy. It's an invasion of due process. And if it does get the case thrown out, fantastic.
You sound just like an attorney because, you know, this is government misconduct.
This is. And it's not acceptable.
It's not acceptable. Government misconduct or unauthorized evidence release, if law enforcement or prosecutors leak the video, but in this case it was law enforcement, when that happens, the government created the prejudice itself. And the conduct violates due process under the 14th Amendment. So, what do judges do? They strongly dislike situations where the state undermines its own prosecution through misconduct. They hate it. Okay, so what are the possible remedies here? What are we talking about? Suppressing the interrogation video, sanctions against the prosecution, maybe in extreme cases, dismissal of the charges. And this, because of the media takeoff, social media takeoff, looks like it falls into the extreme case box. But there's other issues as well, because why is everybody getting up about this? The age of consent in Indiana is 16 years old. It's because of what she's charged with. And this is another weakness in the case. From a legal perspective, there are structural fair trial violations for sure. But there's other things as well. And what I'm talking about is the charge she is charged with, which there's a technical issue flaw as far as I can see. Now, I practice in California. I'm a California practitioner, but I'm taking a look at this Indiana law, and I'm looking at a problem because she's being charged under the child seduction statute. So one of the things I'm concerned about here is apparently she was a secretary at the time, and she struck up this relationship with a 17-year-old student who was calling in saying they couldn't come in, and she was calling him on it, like, you're not sick, get to school. She's a secretary. And so this charge, this Indiana Code, Section 354247, it's broken down kind of like this. In order to prove that she committed this crime, certain elements have to be established by the prosecution. The defendant must be an adult. The defendant works for or volunteers at a school. He's either a teacher, a coach. He or she is either a teacher, coach, staff, etc. The defendant engaged in sexual intercourse or sexual conduct. The other person was at least 16 but under 18. And the defendant was employed by or providing services to the student's school system at the time. But here's the really prickly part. It's the employment connection. It's because Indiana does not simply criminalize sex with a 17-year-old. So they have this particular statute that has to do with a power relationship between the two parties. And so prosecutors have to prove that power relationship between the adult and the student. So from a defense point of view, a criminal defense attorney is going to argue that she did not supervise or teach that student, or maybe that the sexual conduct occurred outside the scope of the school relationship. There's a real technical weakness with this charge. So you've got, one, this case where the media, the social media, is kind of killing it in terms of exposure. And two, it's technically weak. And that's why it's kind of teetering out there, and it's kind of buckling the force. There's real attention out there because prosecutors are determining whether they're going to they're trying to evaluate the case in terms of whether they can make that conviction or not. I think, just personally, based on these flaws, I think they're probably going to consider dismissing it.
Well, and you know what? If they dismiss it, people are going to go crazy. So let's talk about people going crazy for a second, because again, I think the reason that the interrogation video was released, and the reason this is headline news, is you do have an interesting mix here. You've got, she was having sex with an 18-year-old. She did admit to having sex with a 17-year-old. The age of consent is 16 in Indiana. I want to stop there for a second.
Well, I don't think she admitted the 17-year-old relationship. She went silent when she was being interrogated.
Well, she did. Okay, this is interesting. When you're the legal professional, but I thought I heard her say that she did have sex with the 17-year-old, and then she stopped talking.
No, she said she had sex with the 18-year-old.
And then
when
she stopped talking?
Asked about the 17-year-old, she asserted her right to be silent.
Okay. All right. So she's facing 5 counts of child seduction is it for the 18 or the 17-year-old?
For the 17-year-old.
There we go. Okay. So she's facing those 5 counts, and they don't have anything on the record of her admitting it. Okay, I got you there.
And okay, so they released this interrogation video of her simply crying after being interrogated.
Well,
maybe during being interrogated.
I saw 2 minutes, which included questions before she cried. Okay. But what I want to get to is this. I want to go back to public sentiment and mugshots entertainment. And this is where, like, I know a lot of people are going to hate the way I'm talking about this, but I really challenge that people haven't thought this through, because I think the national commentary is that it's okay to call someone a pedo if they engage in sexual activity with somebody under 18. That seems to be the common theme. Well, guess what, pedo lovers? In Indiana, the age of consent is 16. So is 17 a pedo? You can't decide, can you? You're just going to say yes. But you haven't thought it through, because the law says 17's okay. So pedo lovers, you got to figure out what is the age. And you haven't thought it through, because you just assume it's 18.
Well, a lot of states have thought about this, and some have an age of consent of 18, and almost an equal divide have, varying degrees. They have 16, some have 17. I mean, there's no unification in the United States as what the age of consent is. By the way, the global age of consent is 16. So it really confuses things. But the confusing thing about this is, okay, all that aside, Indiana is a state where it's 16, and they're going after her under the seduction statute, which is really, again, about a power differential.
Right.
Because you
I'm
don't want
with you.
teachers having relationships with students when the age of consent is 16 in the state of Indiana.
Okay, but is she a pedo just because of a technicality that she worked at a school? I mean, this is where it's really dumb. If this is what bothers me about society right now on the pedo, is that this is, yes, she's getting caught in a technicality, but if she didn't work at a school, she'd be fine, right?
Well, I'm not even sure that this statute covers this specific situation. But as far as being a pedo is concerned, that's an evaluation that's separate and apart from all of this, because that's a diagnosis.
I know, but general society, people are running around right now calling her a pedo. And that's ridiculous.
Because the general idea is that you throw everybody in the same box.
Yes.
They're not in the same box. There are pedos. And then there are folks that are
Sure
not.
there are.
Okay,
And we're not able to spot them because we've filled the box with non-pedos.
Well, in general, people don't differentiate because they don't understand what constitutes it. And they don't understand that is a psychological analysis. That's a medical definition,
But there are vigilantes with YouTube channels right now going after people like her, and they don't even know what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, because the assumption is that a person is a pedo if they're being prosecuted for sex with an underage individual. That's not essentially so. This is a diagnosis, and it takes a psychological evaluation to determine whether or not a person actually is. A person who actually is far different than just common circumstances where people make very bad mistakes, maybe in terms of morality, in terms of sexuality, whatever. But, this isn't that type of situation.
But in fact, in the interrogation video, what I saw, I believe, what I saw was the law enforcement officer went on then to ask her something about if she's messing around with kids in the classroom or something. And she says, "Oh my God, what are you talking about?" And that's exactly right, because she's not out seeking random kids.
I think
she was having a sexual relationship with a student who that was consensual sex.
Yeah, so the issue is this. Maybe her perception of it is because Indiana, the age of consent is 16. The answer then is correct.
She didn't look at the law books. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and they said, "Let's have sex."
Well, no, I'm not talking about that in particular. Okay. I'm saying that if you're living in Indiana, I think, general knowledge is you understand the parameters. So the parameters is age of consent is 16 in Indiana. Okay? But before that interrogation took place, she must have had some sort of counsel, because she knew when to cut it off and she knew what to say. She knew how to say the magic words. Again, I go back. And I regress to the point where I say, and I mean it, this is like rule 1. Do not do interrogations. Stand on your right to remain silent and let it work out. That's the best case scenario, no matter what. And that's just rule 1. Of Law 101. That's the beginning.
And on social media 101, they're still bitching about how they had sex in a park near a soccer field. I mean, it's gross. The way they drag out all the possible terrorizing ideas of where we might have sex. I really do feel like this kind of negativity really brings down what you would normally enjoy as sex. We are killing the idea of sex in the name of mugshots entertainment. But having said that, this is the final part, is that the text. I do not believe she should have texted him when he called in and said, I'm absent or whatever, and she chose to text him. This is your moment. And the question is, did they already know each other? Why? Who at a school sends a personal text to a student that's calling in to say they're absent because they're not feeling well? They had to have already known each other or something.
Yeah, I mean, she's calling that student on it. So, it makes you think for a moment. Had there been a relationship already established?
Did he
I don't
call
know.
in hoping she'd answer the phone? I mean,
Who
we don't
knows?
know.
But the thing is that she's a secretary. That's what she does. She's not a teacher. She's not a coach. She doesn't have. She's not doing any personal instruction. She's simply a secretary at the school. So the question is, what is the power differential in that relationship? And it probably comes down to Neil, nothing. Okay, which is then questionable.
God, there's no power dynamic. That's so stupid.
Well, then how can you then
She's a
charge her? How can you
secretary.
charge her under the child seduction law?
Because we hate pedos and we think everybody's a pedo. That's where we're at now. We think half the world's pedos.
Well, it's the whole thing is kind of questionable to me. It could have been resolved far differently.
Well, yeah, why is this now a national news story? That's so dumb.
Here's the thing. Because it is, and she gets all that exposure no matter what happens here. Win, lose, draw, whatever. She's going to have to live with this now for the rest of her life because it's out there.
And when the husband, this is opinion, news, commentary, etc. But when a wife beater goes on and gets remarried, guess what he's going to do to that wife?
Well, probably the same.
Yeah. So the wife beater's fine. What have we done? What have we solved here? Nothing's been solved.
Yeah, well, this seems to be the state of our union today.
Yes.
Culturally and media-wise. But, in terms of the legal questions, it makes for just a very weak case. Very weak case.
This case is terrible. It's terrible. I knew it was terrible, and it just got started. What's next? I think isn't there another hearing? Is she on bail? What's going on?
Well, I think that there's a trial scheduled for June of 2026, but I think the prosecutors are going to have to rethink this because I think that now that they've gotten national exposure, it's going to be really embarrassing to fall down on this case, and I'm just not seeing a jury go along with it. I think it's just too weak. And you know what? And long before that, a judge might just it might just dismiss it anyways if they don't. So there's several threshold questions here that have to be answered. Having to do with the things that we've been discussing, but this, the idea is that there's structural fair trial violations. And, as far as the elements go to these charges, there's a real weakness when it comes to the relationship dynamics. So all things considered, probably what the prosecution can do at this point, at least, is dismiss it and blame it on law enforcement. And that would probably save face.
And that would be reasonable. And I think, if we want to have our Dr. Phil moment where everybody moves on and improves their lives, hey, law enforcement, please don't release interrogation videos prematurely. How about wife beaters? If you do beat your wife and it turns into a sex scandal, just keep it, at that. Maybe not call the police and call it, we both fucked up. And then as far as she goes, you know what? Maybe it's time to move on to a different career if society will still let you have one. And maybe try dating people in your own age group, You needed the attention. She said it in her interrogation. I mean, probably because her husband made her feel terrible. Maybe she wasn't enjoying her job anymore. She needs to move on with her life and start dating and start over. But I don't see any true evil here other than mugshots entertainment.
Well, this wife beating thing is just horribly wrong. So, I don't think we settle our disputes that way. And so,
no, and it's taken a back seat. This whole story is no longer about wife beating. He gets a pass.
I'm not sure he does. Maybe he does. I'm not sure he does, but he shouldn't.
He's getting a pass in the eye of social media.
Maybe in the eye of social media.
In fact, social media is like, yeah, beat her,
Yeah, but this, and I think to a degree, the person who interrogated her had that same mindset, but You know,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
it's terrible.
None of this makes up for the fact that she was beaten, and she was beaten. That's something, that's a wrong that needs to be corrected. There needs to be some kind of justice there, and I don't think that there's any kind of mitigation or justification for beating your wife because you caught her in a relationship with someone else. Maybe the best thing to do is just resolve that relationship and move on.
But I will say this, and this is how I know social media loves the wife beating, is that social media also loves Bubba when you drop the soap in prison. And that's another thing. I think that's so messed up. You got to be so twisted to think that's wonderful. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we have a very strange media culture out there. But anyway, okay. Who knows? But this case is really interesting and fascinating because of the intersection of law and because of the intersection, of law and social media.
You've been listening to Sex Crimes Defense Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on this one. We'll see you next time.